Hello everyone, welcome to the second edition of the 240p Club Podcast. I'm here with, as usual, Miss Nikki.
Hi.
And Lord Cuddy here on the left of me.
A.K.A. Ray, A.K.A. What's Up?
Excellent. Alright, well, today's topic, this is episode 002. We are talking about the birthday coming up, actually, within our ranks. Whose birthday is it, Nikki?
Mine!
No, it's not, you liar.
It's not my birthday yet. That's in September, and I would like all kinds of different presents, Sailor Moon wands, and anything Zelda related.
I'll give you a lump of coal.
I'll give you another black eye.
Okay.
Speaking of Zelda, that is exactly whose birthday it is! Hooray!
Yes!
It's also Link's birthday, don't forget about him.
Yeah, because, you know...
His name is Zelda.
Call me Zelda one more time,
Wait.
see what happens.
Wait, what? Okay, while these two figure it out, the hero of the story, the protagonist, is Link.
Everyone's
Everyone.
favorite green elf.
Yeah, is he an elf? Is he a dwarf?
He's not an elf.
Is he,
He's highly in.
He's adorable.
He's a half-elf? I don't know. I don't know about D&D races. She's highly in. That's all I know.
You don't know what kind of hornet's nest you're stirring up by
And
calling
he's
him
not a
elf.
man until he gets a fairy.
Whoa. Hey, I don't want to know about the man's personal life. I just want to know if he's able to save Hyrule. Anyway, it has been 30 years since the original Legend of Zelda popped up for the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Or the Famicom Disk System if you happen to live in Japan.
That too. It didn't have the scrolling of Super Mario Brothers, but one of the Nintendo's greatest achievements was the adventure, the open world adventure, basically, this game was. Miyamoto-san designed this with basically the concept of where he used to explore caves and stuff in native Japan. He decided to put that as part of the game. You'd explore caves, certain secret entrances, labyrinths. It was a revolutionary game. And actually, it's a Nintendo game that still holds up to this day. Young people can pick up a copy of the original Legend of Zelda for any system. They have it for Wii U. You can download it for fairly cheap. It's been ported over to many other systems. You can download it, you can play it today, and it's still just as awesome as it was in 1986.
And it will take you hours to finish.
Including
Yes.
there
Playing
are
it
many
blind.
spin-offs as well.
Not
So-
to mention, even the original has the second quest, where you just beat the game, and then you get a whole second quest where things are rearranged. It's a lot harder, and honestly, like, some of those mazes were ridiculous.
Sort of as a backstory to the creation of the game, a couple years before Legend of Zelda came out, there was this arcade game in Japan called Tower of Jiraga, which was extremely cryptic. I think you were playing as this guy called Gilgamesh, and in order to save the princess or whatever, you had to collect certain items as you were going through the levels. And collecting some of the items, well, yes, a lot of the items were very hidden. Some of the items, if you picked up, would prevent you from getting the good ending. And when they were making this game, they were kind of relying on the fact that because Japan is so densely populated, people who played this game would come to each other and give each other the locations of the items and so forth.
So it was like a massive scavenger hunt.
Right. And eventually they would find the correct combination of these extremely hidden items to get the good ending.
Nice.
Legend of Zelda was kind of similar to this because there were a lot of cryptically hidden things, you would have to burn a certain bush in order to find a heart container, or bomb a certain wall to find the 8th labyrinth or whatever.
And that was the thing with Zelda too. The first Zelda game, there was only one ending, but the only way to actually beat Ganon was to find the silver arrows, which were hidden in the 9th level.
As was the red ring, which granted you extra armor.
Yeah, you didn't have to find that to beat the game, though. You had to find the silver arrows, or else you were just going to die a quick death against Ganon. it's basically, it was one of the first games that I'm aware of that didn't rely on any sort of score. You didn't get scored in Zelda. The only score was how many times you've died popped up on the characters, like the save screen. Primitive, basically, there was 3 saves, like you enter your name, basically it showed you heart containers and how many times you've died. Or, as better known in that game, how many games, quote unquote, you played. Mm-hmm. There's a secret code when you press start, like you hold up, I believe it's up and A, up A and select or something like that to go to the continue screen so you can quit playing.
So, yeah, the original Famicom had the controllers hardwired, so any player would be able to, like, find this easily. I bet it was in the instruction manual back then. But if you were playing it in America, you could just insert whatever into the controller slots, and you might not have had Q controllers. So if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to have that same save feature. It was just really intended that you had a second controller to save whenever.
Well, that was also back in the day when Nintendo included 2 controllers with their system. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to go buy a second controller. Anyway, Zelda was such a revolutionary game. There was a backlash, though, against Zelda 2, because it changed it to more of an adventure game. There was still, like, a little overhead map, but once you got into a location, it was more side-scrolling than overhead.
This was before the series was standardized like it is today. Like, they were kind of, like, experimenting a bit, and then they kind of perfected it with the 3rd game, but we'll get to that in a second.
Well, we can get to that today. We're talking about the whole Zelda series in general,
and
really.
The 2nd game was also extremely difficult. In fact, as a matter of fact, as a kid, I ended up with a defective copy of Zelda 2.
Ooh.
I first heard about it through a strategy guide or something, and ended up buying the game, and the game would freeze whenever I went to certain screens, like, very early in the game. Like, there's this beetle enemy that pops up on the way to the first dungeon, and the game would lock up when it appeared on screen for some reason.
Wow,
I had no idea. I had no idea how to get past that until, like, years later.
I had a defective copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. Like, it used to freeze up after you hit the start button. And I thought it was my system at first, but it turns out it was the copy of the game. There was something wrong with it. We had to return it and get a new copy. My second copy obviously worked. But yeah, no, one of the more fascinating things also about that time, Nintendo was going through something called a chip shortage, which I think personally was manufactured in order to limit the amount of third-party titles and etc. that were released. But when Zelda 2 came out, there was not a whole lot of competition for adventure games around that same exact time. There were some companies making games, but again, for Nintendo, they limited their titles to you had to get the seal of quality basically by submitting it to any Nintendo Entertainment,
And some companies managed to get around this by making, like, subdivisions. Like, you had Konami, and then they had this second, like, sub-company called Ultra that they ended up releasing.
Ultra got a lot of their licenses. That's how they got around the chip shortage. But they basically limited every company to 5 titles per year. Basically not to overflood the market. They learned a lesson from the Atari debacle of the early 80s. Nintendo, the chip shortage was pretty much over by 1989, and then opened up the floodgates. But Zelda 2 came out in the US in '88, and that was the end of the chip shortage right there. That was their grand finale. They released this title and another gold cartridge for the NES. Fantastic, despite the reputation it got as being the weakest in the some of the original series, it was a solid game. Nikki, you played the first 2 Zelda games, right?
I have played only a small amount of them. The first game that I played was A Link to the Past. As I mentioned before, I'm a little bit younger than my 2 co-hosts here. So they grew up in the NES era, I grew up in the SNES era. So A Link to the Past is one of the first games I ever played.
Now, what was your feeling when you first played that game?
Am I allowed to curse on here? Because I just remember saying, like, holy shit, what an amazing game it was. Actually, it is still my favorite Zelda game of all time.
I remember before I even played it, there was a video game magazine. I found, like, it was in the supermarket. It had a hologram of Sonic. They were basically hyping up the second Sonic game coming out for Genesis. It was still, like, 2 months away by that point, but, you know, everyone picked it up to check out the preview of all that. And I didn't own a Super Nintendo at the time. I owned the Genesis, but, you know, I always wanted a Super Nintendo as well. I didn't grow up in a rich family, so I didn't get both until, you know, a couple of Christmases apart. But, yeah, the Super Nintendo, the first thing I've seen was the strategy guide to Link to the Past. And I just thought how cool this was. Like, you know, they were showing, it's basically the light world, like the tower dungeon before you reach the dark world, the pyramid. Like, that's where it stopped, like when you were on top of that pyramid. So it was fantastic reading that. Just I thought that was towards the end of the game, though. I thought that was just going to be it. Like, you know, you're just going to wind up with this pyramid, and then that would be the end of the game. But when I picked it up, you know, that wasn't even near the halfway point of the game.
I remember seeing the commercial for it back in, God, how long ago was it? And
92.
92, yeah. And I remember seeing it was I'm trying to remember it exactly. It was a guy dressed up like Link, and he was fighting a shadow form of Ganon. Because I think at that point, if you haven't played the first two, you didn't know what what Ganon had looked like at that point.
And they didn't even acknowledge that Ganon was in the game.
Called him yeah.
No, he was Ganon towards. Once you got to the Dark World, like that's when you figured out Ganon was the antagonist.
Well,
right,
my introduction to Legend of Zelda was through this cartoon show that used to run on TV called the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. Every Friday they would show a Legend of Zelda cartoon in place of the usual Super Mario Brothers cartoon.
Give you some background. After school, this used to come on. Every time you would leave school, you'd go home. I don't know how you did it in your family. When I was a little kid, you did homework, but usually you got a time to sit down between like when you got home from school around 2:30, 3 o'clock ish to about like maybe 4 o'clock, 4:30ish. So I would watch like a block of like cartoons, and that was one of them, Super Mario Brothers Super Show. Monday through Thursday they used to show the Mario Brothers cartoons, but they used to show a clip from that Friday's Zelda cartoon. And then on Friday, bam, the whole episode was dedicated to the Legend of Zelda.
So the Legend of Zelda cartoon prominently featured Ganon as the antagonist. So technically, anyone who hadn't played Legend of Zelda got spoiled as to the identity of the main antagonist of the game, or at least sort of what he looked like. He didn't look exactly like he looked in the game, but it was pretty close.
And I didn't really see Ganon until much later on, because I sucked at Zelda as a little kid. I mean,
we all did.
Yeah, we didn't have walkthroughs back then. I couldn't go.
And
we didn't have the internet.
A lot.
Yes,
like Dark Souls amounts.
We probably ended up finding most of our dungeons through Nintendo Power.
Yep.
That's another peculiar thing. Nintendo Power, it was a magazine that ran back then, and it was our equivalent of the internet. Like back
I think most people know what Nintendo Power
for
is.
Strategy guides and such. And it's a peculiar thing. It got us to buy a lot of games, but it also spoiled certain elements of the games while it was doing it, because it would put a lot of strategies for games in.
I never used Nintendo Power for A Link to the Past. One thing that...
Well, you didn't really have to. This is more like for the first Zelda where everything is extremely quick.
Right, because I had like 2 other people playing with me, and it suddenly clicked into our head that characters within the game will tell you where to go. You go to Kakariko Village, and you go into one of the houses, and they will write on your map where you need to go.
Right.
So when you follow that, then that person tells you where you need to go, etc., etc.
Yeah, Link to the Past was a lot more straightforward than the previous 2 games.
Although it did have some cryptic parts.
It kind of perfected the formula that the Zelda series would follow from that point forward.
It took me a few tries to figure out how to get to Palace 6, like the swamp level. Mm-hmm. It took me quite a few tries to figure that one out, and also Turtle Rock, where you had to go to get to the last dungeon.
Oh, that took me
definitely took a lot of tries. The first Zelda, I didn't figure that one out until like you talk to your classmates or whoever's playing it, your cousin, the kid next door that's really good at the game. you know, that was what made Zelda special. Like, we didn't have the internet. We just connected. We had Nintendo Power to give us some advice to most of the levels, but, you know, Nintendo Power only told you so much. You had to practice at some of this. That was really the appeal of Zelda, and that's the great part about watching little kids to, like, young teens, basically people that didn't grow up in this era, playing this game for the first time. It's like, you know, if they're dedicated to it, it's rewarding to see, like, you know, them play it, put in some hard work and try to figure out stuff.
I think the next game after A Link to the Past was Ocarina of Time, which is completely...
Actually, you're skipping one.
You're skipping Link's Awakening.
Game Boy! Game Boy, Link's Awakening.
Forgive me, and that was a fantastic game, too. And I completely forgot about that one. Sorry, everyone. And I call myself a Zelda fan.
Easily the best Game Boy game available.
Yes.
That was one of them.
It also had a couple cute little Mario cameos in there, too. Little Chomp Chomp was there. And
Oh, yeah,
they also,
they were in Link to the Past, too.
They also had the Yoshi doll because Yoshi had recently debuted in Super Mario World. And he was pretty popular, so they were like, hey, why not throw this guy in as like a required item to beat the game?
Another, did you know, if you conquer level 9 height 2, I believe it is, in Tetris, you see on the NES, I should clarify, you see a cut screen with a lot of the Nintendo characters. Link is one of them. He's playing a
I've seen that recently when the Mexican Runner, a Twitch streamer, recently beat Tetris on the hottest difficulty on Type B.
Level 9,
like,
height 5?
Yes. He had, and it took him hours too. You saw like Mario, Luigi, Link, Pit from Kid Icarus.
Samus.
Yeah, she was in there too.
I think Donkey Kong.
I think doesn't Link make another cameo in the Final Fantasy game where there's a grave that says Link was
Yeah,
there?
the very first Final Fantasy, like you reach Elf Town, here lies Link. You click on one of the graves. Yeah, no,
I believe he's also sleeping in one of the beds in Super Mario RPG.
he is.
That was Samus, I think, actually.
No, Link was in there
Link.
too.
It was Samus. Well,
Maybe
Samus was definitely in Mario RPG. I remember the dialogue, like it's in the back of my head. I'm resting for Mother Brain or something, she said.
Yeah, it's great. Nintendo's their characters and all kinds of cameo roles. But yeah, the most popular among the younger generation right now is Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time. You know what? I'm going to just come out and say it. I didn't play that game too much.
I spent God knows how many hours on that game.
It took me about 2 weeks to beat it when it first came out. I still have the gold cartridge to this day.
I know the two words about that game: Water Temple.
Yes. It's not as bad as people say. It's just...
Apparently in the original version you can make it unwinnable if you went through the wrong door, or at least not quite unwinnable, but you would have to have a lot of skill to get the key in order to like progress through the dungeon.
I remember the first time playing that, and where you went to go see Rudo in like one of the first rooms, and I remember when she started swimming up more towards the roof, and I kept trying to chase after her, but you just end up losing her.
I barely played it, so I can't even comment on it. But everyone like talks about how hard that dungeon is. It's like, I guess it depends on your skill level with like a lot of these games. Like,
It depends on your patience level
as well.
Like the Water Temple for generally just about every Zelda game is like a death trap.
Majora's Mask, the game that followed Ocarina of Time, is the one I've barely played, and
I haven't
people
played
on the
too much
internet are
either.
probably like seething at us right now because that's like a revered game nowadays. It was recently ported to the 3DS.
I actually have a port of it to GameCube. They put out, I believe it was for
Master
Nintendo.
Quest.
Yeah, for like a Nintendo Power like anniversary to commemorate. It was the remake of Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, and then they put Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time on there as well.
I think there was a demo for Four Swords eventually.
Yeah, there was. Four Swords. No, not Four Swords. Was it Twilight Princess?
Wind Waker was
Wind Waker.
Wind Waker, that was it.
Wind Waker. That was
Another extremely controversial Zelda game based on the graphics.
Not so much nowadays.
Not so much nowadays because of the HD remakes that had come out not too long ago.
That's the thing with the Zelda series, though. You had Zelda and Zelda 2 basically both followed each other. Like, Zelda 2 Link was a year older, and then after that, it split apart. Like, every Zelda game was a different universe, supposedly.
Apparently, I've heard a rumor that the Zelda in Zelda 2 isn't the same Zelda as in Zelda 1.
No, it really isn't.
The Zelda in Zelda 2 is supposedly the original Zelda, who the Legend of Zelda is based on.
They, in Zelda 1, the princess you save is named Zelda. Like, they explained this in the instruction booklet. Like, Zelda 2, when you're starting the quest, Impa, which is the old lady that sends Link on his quest to begin with, explains to him about the legends. You basically, in the first Legend of Zelda, you found the Triforce of Power. You know, you had the Triforce of Wisdom already, and then you had the two Triforces, Wisdom and Power. You had to find the Triforce of Courage in the third one.
In the first one, you build wisdom
through 8 parts.
By going through
because she was afraid that Ganon would get
by going through the 8 labyrinths, because Ganon already has the Triforce of Power, and that's kind of what the show was based off.
Yeah, you basically after you beat Ganon, in order to get to Ganon's level 9, you had to have the entire Triforce of Wisdom. And then Ganon had the Triforce of Power, and once you beat him, you reunited the two Triforces, peace reigned along Hyrule, etc., etc. However, it didn't really reign along Hyrule. That Zelda in Zelda 1 was named Zelda. She was the princess. Impa in Zelda 2 told Link about the story of the original princess who was put under a sleeping spell. And opened the door, and there she was sleeping. And as in order to mourn his daughter, the king ordered that every princess, since should be named Zelda. Mm-hmm. So the Zelda you rescue is not the same Zelda in Zelda 2. But that's the only time the storyline of Legend of Zelda connects to each other. The rest of the storylines, the Link to the Past was a completely different universe, supposedly.
Link's Awakening was said to be in the same universe.
It was said to be, but it took place in a different land, so they differentiated it. But and then
it's one big convoluted.
Twilight Princess was different. Wind Waker was completely different.
Well, I think there were 3 games within that.
There was. They were connected.
I believe it was Wind Waker, Spirit Tracks, and Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah, I know Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask were connected.
Yes. It's the timeline after Zelda. If you haven't beaten Ocarina of Time, I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah, you should definitely play it. Even if you've never played it before, try to track it down on certain systems.
There's also the Zelda Historia book if you don't want to listen to anything we're saying, or if you don't feel like playing through all the games and you just want to know the story, real quick. That book will help you.
Zelda has...
You can always just watch a Let's Play or something.
That too, on YouTube. Yeah, Zelda has established itself in our culture as an institution nowadays. Everyone still knows the Legend of Zelda, basically. Triforce wallets are out there. People wearing Zelda shirts, Zelda tattoos.
And, of course, the actual ocarina that you can play.
Yeah, you could actually get an actual working ocarina.
And sometimes I dress up as Link.
Yeah, and then sometimes Nikki dresses up as Link. Mm-hmm. Like today. Zelda has stuck around for 30 years. Completely strong, still going. Nintendo, their console market, they might be in a third place to Xbox and PlayStation, but their licenses are still part of the popular culture, and anytime they put out a Zelda game, massive amounts of hype pop up.
I'm sure you all watched E3 where they dedicated the Tuesday to completely to the new Zelda game Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. We don't know when that game is coming out, but it looks really
good. Or even for what system, because I know there's rumors that they're putting out a system beyond the Wii U.
Mm-hmm. Well, they'll probably do what they did with Twilight Princess, where they put a port of it on the GameCube, and then they put the actual game on the Wii.
I can see that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where they'll probably put the port on the Wii U, and then the next one on the NX.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever the system's going to wind up being called.
They've also gotten a lot of publicity for putting Pokemon Go out on phones recently, but that's not what we're talking about tonight.
We'll discuss Pokemon another time.
Nintendo has a lot of licenses. But yeah, no, what else is happening in the world of Zelda? Isn't there a Symphony Tour happening?
Yes, there is a Symphony Tour that will be going on around, I believe it starts around August. and it's going to go into September. So if you want to check your local cities, check your local venues.
Yeah, to celebrate the 30th anniversary, they're doing a full-on symphony of all the Zelda music.
I did go see this about 2 years ago, and I definitely recommend it.
Excellent. Yeah, Legend of Zelda is still going strong to this day.
Happy birthday!
Yes, happy birthday to Link and Zelda. Thanks for listening to us today. If you want more information on the 240p Club, you want to go to our website, 240pclub.com. Also, we have facebook.com/240p Club, and we're also on twitch.tv under 240p Club.